Pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. It's the ninth of 14 characteristics of Ur-Fascism by Umberto Eco. Let's take a look. For Ur-Fascism, there's no struggle for life, but rather, life is lived for struggle. Thus, pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. It is bad because life is permanent warfare. This, however, brings about an Armageddon complex. Since enemies have to be defeated, there must be a final battle, after which the movement will have control of the world. And this is this is interesting to me because um, of the what we were reading earlier about one of the characteristics is this fear of a new world order, a cabal, a secret cabal of billionaires that are pulling all of the strings economically and politically, and in order for fascism to have this ideology that that pacifism is trafficking with the enemy, you have to have an enemy. You have to set up an enemy. And so Trump and the fascists he is working with have not only set up enemies outside of the world, but outside of the country, but also inside the country. But such a final solution implies a further era of peace, a golden age, which contradicts the principle of permanent war. No fascist leader has ever succeeded in solving this predicament. I think this helps to explain why what I have seen is that the MAGA supporters, the MAGA are still mad. They're still mad. They won the election. They have control over the judicial, legislative, and executive branches. They have all the power right now, and they're still mad.
Today, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of sore winners. I've had to shut down comments on several TikTok and Instagram reels because of misinformation that is being spouted about female presidential candidates, about Kamala, about Obama, about Hillary. And it's coming from people who voted for Trump. Here's my question: why? You won, right? And we accept that. We're not going to go storm the Capitol about it. So why do you feel the need for all of us to come around to your way of thinking? Because that probably isn't going to happen. I just keep thinking about the fact that Donald Trump ran a campaign based on fear and hate. And now that he's won, all the people who leaned into that fear and hate have nowhere else to put it. Where does that rage go? And maybe that's why we're seeing some of these really negative comments. It's why we're seeing men writing terrible messages like, your body, my choice. It's why Black people have gotten disgusting text messages about reporting to fields for enslavement and picking cotton. And it is the very concept of a sore winner. You keep telling us to get over it. Maybe you should get over it first.
I think this is one of the reasons why President Trump is still kind of stirring up shit across the world. I think this is one of the reasons, too, why he has been putting tariffs on our allies and basically just disrupting the whole entire world's ecosystem and political system. Because if he leaned into this win and leaned into some of the rhetoric that he's already been spewing about no new wars and living in a peaceful society, well, then you have this world peace. You have this golden era. And the MAGA has nothing if they have nothing to be angry about.
Do you have any message for Ukrainians who, after 3 years of fighting, might feel betrayed or disappointed at not having a seat at these initial talks in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think I'm really disappointed in what's happened. I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president, and I've been watching these people being killed at levels that you've rarely seen, not even close, since the Second World War. And I'm very disappointed. I hear that they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a
You
seat for
think?
3 years, and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half baked negotiator could have settled this years ago without the loss of much land, very
Much
little land,
land, very little
without the loss
land.
of any lives, and without the loss of cities that are just laying on their sides. You have those magnificent golden domes that are shattered, will never be replaced. You can't replace them. The whole civilization has changed because of what. So when they're worried about not being seated, you mean somebody that should have gone in and made a deal a long time ago? You could have made a deal. This is one that could have made a deal. There was no talk of this during the Trump administration. Putin would have never, ever done it.
He
And I
would.
think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
There
I
it
could have
is.
made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land,
Almost.
everything, almost
Everything,
all of the land, and no
but
people would have been
almost.
killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way.
So Trump is trying to stir shit up. Just implying that Ukraine started this war is already kind of like poking at the bear, right? Like we all know that Putin started this war, and I mean, it's incredible gaslighting, is what it is. It's trying to rewrite the history, right? It's trying to blame the victim, which are all bully moves. But in doing so, he's continuing the momentum of the conflict. He's not really offering any legitimate resolution. He's not even invited Zelensky to the table of negotiations for how to end this war. How is Putin going to end a war with Zelensky if Zelensky is not even at the table? So Trump does not really have any intention of peacefully ending a war. What he has an intention of doing is siding with Russia, giving away big pieces of Ukraine, and as we heard in that clip, he's also interested in making a deal. And the deal he's proposed is to take 50% of Ukraine's minerals and resources. That does not sound like a deal that's being made in good faith at all. I want to take a look now at what is going on in Israel and Gaza. And I want to read this Politico article. It's entitled Trump's Gaza Fantasy is a Recipe for a Forever War. And it's just a fascinating look at why Trump does not have a vested interest in making sure that wars in that part of the country are settled peacefully and peacefully and in justice. Let's get started. Oh, and this is written by Politico EU, which is a European arm of Politico. U.S. president is pressing countries to take in Palestinians by threatening to cut aid, but it is too dangerous for Arab leaders to accept that blackmail. U.S. President Donald Trump wants to take over Gaza and transform it into the Riviera of the Middle East, where the world's people can live. Everyone but Palestinians, that is. And I also find this really interesting that Trump is not interested in peace. And quite frankly, he's really kind of not even interested in war. He's interested in real estate. It's disgusting how when you kind of roll it back, everything really just comes right down to Trump wanting to have more land. He's a land grabber. That's what he is. It kind of reminds me of that scene in the Christmas movie Die Hard. And if you think Die Hard is not a Christmas movie, just roll on by because you ain't my people. No, I'm kidding. But in that movie, there is a scene where Bruce Willis finally comes to the point of understanding what this whole hostile takeover of the building was about. And it is just about money.
After all your posturing, all your little speeches, you're nothing but a common thief.
I am an exceptional thief, Mrs. McLean, and since I'm moving up to kidnapping, you should be more polite.
And Trump just seems to be like an ordinary thief. Oh, no, no, no. I am an extraordinary thief. According to Trump's plan, Palestinians would be displaced, most likely by force, to neighboring countries, which also, by the way, is a form of genocide. Genocide is not only limited to the murdering and extinction of a people, it can also be the complete and utter displacement of a people from their land. And his real estate deal of the century, treating Gaza like its Atlantic City, risks propelling the US into yet another forever war, which would certainly serve the fascist ideology. This would not be a war triggered by any high-minded ambitions of bringing democracy to the Middle East. It would be a conflict fueled by the fantasies of a property tycoon. It would make the US arguably an even bigger target for every aspiring jihadi group and throw the entire region into greater turbulence, destabilizing allies from Cairo to Riyadh. It could draw US troops on the ground, something Trump hasn't ruled out, into prolonged urban battles, inviting worldwide condemnation and possibly prosecution as they clear out Palestinians in a forcible transfer of population. But as any real estate developer should know, before you turf out residents and start building, there are NIMBYs to contend with. That would be not in my backyard, people who don't want this happening anywhere near them. In this case, Egypt, Jordan, and the Gulf Arabs. Unsurprisingly, they're not impressed. In an overnight statement, Saudi Arabia totally rejected displacing Palestinians from their ancestral land and warned it wouldn't normalize relations with Israel without the establishment of a Palestinian state. So one of the things that all of the presidents in modern history have been trying to do is to allow a two-state solution so that both Palestine and Israel can govern themselves on their own land. It's a move that would wreck the completion of the Abraham Accords, the Arab-Israeli normalization process Trump kickstarted during his first term in office and has moved apace since 2020. In Trump's extraordinary press conference on Gaza that triggered the backlash, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sat beaming by his side, and the U.S. president argued that the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza should simply move to neighboring countries with humanitarian hearts and great wealth. As far as he and Netanyahu see it, they're finally changing the Middle East paradigm. They're giving up on what every U.S. president since Jimmy Carter has attempted to achieve, a negotiated settlement to a two-state solution, and replacing it with what Israeli hard-right politicians have wanted for years, getting rid of the Palestinian problem by getting rid of the Palestinians. But can any Gulf leader risk facilitating what to all intents and purposes would amount to ethnic cleansing and a violation of international law? Not to mention the fury it would whip up on their own streets, possibly imperiling their regimes. The Salafi jihadist enemies of the Gulf's royal families would make massive political capital with the uprooting of Gazans and all its echoes of past displacements, including the Nakba catastrophe, the flight and expulsion of an estimated 700,000 Palestinians in 1948. In his speech, Trump also name-checked Egypt and Jordan as possible destinations for displacing Palestinians. However, both Egypt's Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Jordan's King Abdullah have repeatedly opposed Trump's plan to resettle Palestinians from the Gaza Strip in their respective countries. They've also been warning him since his first week in office, when the newly inaugurated president breezily told reporters, "I've helped Sisi a lot, and I hope he will help us. I think he'll take in Palestinians from Gaza, and I believe the King of Jordan will do the same." The Trump administration is gambling on being able to strong-arm Cairo and Amman by threatening to cut U.S. aid, as both countries are directly dependent on it. Without aid, they would be forced to introduce austerity measures, like things that they can do to stimulate their own economies, risking political and economic turmoil. Just last week, Trump hinted at the leverage he feels he has. They will do it. They will do it. We do a lot for them, and they're going to do it, he said. But so far, the hints of financial blackmail have not been working. The Egyptian leader repeated his rejection of resettling any Palestinians in his country last week, saying, "The displacement and removal of the Palestinian people from their lands is an injustice that we will never participate in." And Abdullah told European officials in Brussels that Jordan remains unwavering on the necessity of establishing Palestinians on their land and gaining their legitimate rights in accordance with the two-state solution. Moreover, as these messages didn't seem to be getting through, top diplomats from Egypt, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar all flatly rejected any forcible displacement of Palestinians during a meeting in Cairo on Saturday. "We affirm our rejection of any attempts to compromise Palestinians' unalienable rights, whether through settlement activities or evictions or annex of land or through vacating the land from its owners, in any form or under any circumstances or justifications," they said in a joint communiqué. So it seems U.S. financial coercion may well have its limits. Both leaders are trapped between a rock and a hard place, but while a halt of American aid would cause them considerable political problems, the risks to their own survival are likely even greater if they agreed to resettle 1.8 million resentful and angry Gazans, along with Hamas. The Jordanian monarch was just 8 years old when his country was plunged into a civil war in 1970, which saw his father, King Hussein, battle with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, for control of the country. The Jordanian monarch attacked the PLO to preserve Hashemite rule after several failed assassination attempts and 3 hijacked flights. His son would likely have little desire to expose himself or his heirs to the risk of an interloper endangering the monarchy once more. Meanwhile, Sisi's security forces are already engaged in a long-standing counterinsurgency against Islamic militant groups in the Sinai, where the displaced Gazans would likely have to be accommodated. So basically saying that we would be taking war-torn Palestinians and throwing them into a war-torn Sinai. Regional leaders can therefore only hope Trump isn't serious, that this is just an opening gambit. And they may well play for time, hoping to distract him with other deals and transactions, such as improving on the Abraham Accords. And I think I'm going to do another video digging a little bit deeper into the Abraham Accords, because I'd heard of it, but I didn't know really that much about it. And yeah, there's a lot there. The Saudis, for example, could agree to normalize relations as long as Trump's Gaza plan doesn't proceed. Some regional analysts also question whether Trump is serious. President Trump is perhaps trying to achieve a few objectives in his provocative comments on Gaza displacement. Firstly, he could be trying to disrupt conventional thinking on a long-standing conflict that has yet to be resolved or produce viable solutions, said Chatham House's Sanam Vakil. Moreover, he may be seeking to placate supporters and high-level donors in the United States and shore up Netanyahu's fragile political balance of power. Nonetheless, Vakil added, this will likely lead to greater multilateral unity between the region's Arab leaders. And the rich Gulf nations could step forward to fill the gap left once the U.S. cuts foreign aid to Egypt and Jordan. But the hope that Trump and Netanyahu will back away from the idea of displacement may well be misplaced. This was no off-the-cuff thinking or improvisation, and they are banking on Arab states finally being accommodating. This is a region, however, that has had a way of wrecking even the best laid plans. This plan is far from that. So there is ample evidence to suggest that Trump is not at all interested in bringing peace to any part of the world. What we're actually seeing is really an effort to destabilize the political opponents and political allies, quite frankly. But whatever it is that Trump is doing outside there in the world, what he's doing here inside the United States is riling up his base with the threats of the enemies that are out there, which he now basically is claiming are Ukraine and Gaza, where like 3 years ago, the enemy was Russia and Israel, or Hamas, to be fair. But he's also stirring up this unrest inside the country, right? Like, we are still blaming black and brown people for everything that happens in this country. We're still blaming Biden for everything bad that happens in this country. And the fact that they've won everything and they're still mad is just perpetuating this idea that a fascist leader cannot have both perpetual war and this final battle that is going to end in a golden age of peace. You just can't have it both ways. I'm snarky positivity, which means I always end on a positive note. My positive note for today is this: the shit that he's trying to stir up, both in Ukraine and in Gaza, does not seem to be currently working. There seem to be a lot of players on the world stage that are like, yeah, no, that's not happening. that ain't happening, not on my watch. So while we seem to be having this radio silence in the United States from both Republicans and Democrats, like, where the hell are you people? We need to hear something. What are you doing? How are we getting through this? How are we going to resolve all this chaos? There does seem to be a pushback from the rest of the world. And that is encouraging to me, because if the entire world rolled over for Trump, we would all be fucked. Like, seriously fucked. Thanks again for sticking with me. If you like the content, please subscribe. I'm Snarky Positivity, and I am enjoying learning this alongside of you. Okay, bye. State, which is what all of the most recent modern presidents have been working toward: a two-state. Shit, I can't remember what I just was thinking about. A two-state solution. No, that's not it. I'll come up with it. I'll think of it.